Hello, my name is Liz. In the summer of 2016, I found myself living in Houston, Texas, at a friend's house, while my parents were back in Louisiana, searching for an apartment to move into. The plan was for me to stay with my friend Leisha until they found a place. It seemed like a simple enough arrangement, and I was excited for the change. Little did I know, this summer would turn out to be one of the most unsettling experiences of my life. Leisha's house was massive. The summer classes were light, and we had little homework, so we spent most of our time relaxing, eating out, and hanging around. Our friendship was relatively new, only about 3 or 4 months old. How we met was an interesting story, but I'll save that for another time. One day, as we lounged around discussing plans, Leisha's 2 younger sisters, both lively and full of energy, joined us in the living room. We were discussing the idea of a horror movie marathon when the youngest sister, who was around 10 or 12 years old, proposed an idea that immediately caught my attention. She suggested that we make the night even scarier by using a Ouija board. Leisha and I exchanged glances. The idea seemed like a fun way to spook her sisters, so we reluctantly agreed. However, before we could set anything up, their maid burst into the room. She was visibly upset and warned us against using the Ouija board. She believed it was a portal to hell, and that it could invite entities that could ruin our lives. Her concerns seemed a bit over the top to us, but her fear was genuine. She even said she would hide the board to prevent us from using it. The maid was from El Salvador, a country where the supernatural is taken very seriously. Her culture viewed Ouija boards, demonic entities, and witchcraft as real threats. We, however, saw it as a harmless game. That night, we set up the Ouija board with candles, trying to create a spooky atmosphere. We laughed and joked, attempting to scare Leisha's sisters, but nothing unusual happened. The night passed without incident, and we soon forgot about it. A few nights later, we decided to give the Ouija board another try. It was around 3 a.m., the so-called witching hour, and the weather outside was stormy, with heavy rain and howling winds. We thought the ominous atmosphere would add to the experience. We set up the board again, lit the candles, and began our session. At first, nothing happened. We were about to give up when the planchette suddenly began to move. We both stared at it in disbelief. We tried to convince ourselves it was one of us moving it, but neither of us was touching it. The planchette spelled out unsettling words like dead and hell. Even though we were skeptics, the answers were disconcerting. We decided to stop and go to bed, feeling uneasy but trying to brush it off. A few days passed without anything noteworthy, and we began to relax. Then one night, Leisha's parents went out to see a play and invited me to join them. I declined, not being interested in plays and not wanting them to spend money on me. I stayed home alone, saying I had homework. Leisha's parents left around 7 p.m., and I was left alone in the house with their cat. The cat was peacefully napping on the couch when it suddenly woke up, alert and focused on something invisible. Its behavior became increasingly aggressive as it growled and stared at a corner of the room. At first, I thought it was just a bug or something, but then I heard strange noises coming from the upstairs. It sounded like someone was running on the second floor. I looked up but saw nothing. The noise grew louder and seemed to come from all around me. The atmosphere in the house felt heavy and suffocating. I was terrified and didn't understand what was happening. Instead of running out the front door, which was right in front of me, I ran upstairs to Leisha's room. As I reached the staircase, I heard a loud growl from her parents' room, which was open. The sound was so distinct that I froze for a moment, trying to process it. Something felt incredibly wrong. I reached Leisha's room, closed the door behind me, and stood there, convinced that something was on the other side. I felt a strange heat rising from under my feet, almost like an electric heater was beneath me. I was terrified and thought I might die that night. I recited whatever prayers I could remember. I opened the door and ran downstairs and out the front door. Everything felt like it was moving in slow motion. Once outside, I felt a strange sense of relief and safety. The neighborhood was quiet and dark, but it felt safer than the house. I sat outside for about 2 hours, trying to call Leisha, but getting no answer. I didn't want to alarm anyone, so I stayed put. Eventually, I went back inside, and the house felt normal again. The fear was gone, and I felt safe. I went to the kitchen for some painkillers for a severe migraine, and then returned to my room. Exhausted, I fell asleep instantly. In the days following, small, unsettling occurrences continued. They were infrequent, but left me feeling uneasy. One night, while I was sleeping, I heard the door open and someone come in. Half asleep, I saw Leisha come in and sit next to me. I tried to talk to her, but she just sat there crying without saying a word. The next day, I learned that Leisha's parents had a major argument at the play they attended. They continued fighting when they returned home, creating a tense atmosphere in the house. My parents were still in Louisiana, and I felt uncomfortable as an outsider caught in the middle of their family drama. A week passed, and things started to settle down. Leisha's aunt arranged for someone to bless the house, who mentioned that there was darkness and an entity present. We didn't take it seriously and even joked about it. Leisha's aunt and uncle shared their experiences. My uncle had a dream where an entity covered in hair told him to burn the Ouija board. The name the entity gave in the dream matched the name we had received during our Ouija session. This was disturbing, and we decided to tell my uncle about our experience. He and my aunt were upset, but decided to burn the Ouija board, despite our concerns about potential adverse effects. When my parents finally visited from Louisiana, I noticed my dad acting strangely. He seemed uncomfortable and awkward, which was unusual for him. He even dropped his tea, which was out of character. Later, my mother called me, saying my father had felt something dark or like black magic in the house. This was surprising because my dad had never talked about such things before. My father's reaction was particularly telling. He had no prior knowledge of the issues we were experiencing, yet he sensed something unsettling. It was as if an outsider had picked up on the strange atmosphere in the house. My father mentioned that it was odd how both families had 3 daughters each, and how we had met and moved into the same house. Reflecting on how I met Leisha, I remembered that it was a chance encounter. I had been struggling to make friends after moving to the US in 2014. One night, after a frustrating sorority event, I prayed for a good friend. Shortly after, I received notifications about a group with my name, where girls with the same name were added. I tried to leave, but was repeatedly added back. Eventually, I connected with one of the girls who happened to live in Houston. Her recommendation to move to Houston instead of California influenced my parents' decision. Our move to Houston brought many changes and challenges, but it also led to the haunting experience that summer. It felt like everything had been orchestrated. as if fate had a hand in how we met and the events that followed. Leisha and I remained friends despite the difficulties. The entity we encountered was notorious for causing disruptions rather than physical harm. It didn't show itself, but created an atmosphere of sudden sadness and distress. Sometimes it felt like it was still around, affecting our mood and sense of well-being. We researched the entity and found information online. I even checked the area where I felt the heat, which seemed concentrated in one spot. It was almost as if the heat was a solid form, adding to the unsettling nature of our experiences. In the end, the haunting left a lasting impression on me. The events of that summer were a powerful reminder of how our perceptions and beliefs can influence our experiences. Whether it was a real supernatural presence or a manifestation of our collective anxieties, the experience was undeniably impactful. It was a summer I would never forget, filled with fear, mystery, and the unknown.